Over to you, Chair.
Great. Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Welcome to the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee meeting on the 4th of December. I make it 11:35 now. If I can remind everyone, the meeting's being broadcast live and a recording will be available on the website following the meeting. And if I can request that all members have their cameras on so they're visible, but the officers keep their cameras off and microphones off unless they're presenting. So agenda item 1 is apologies. Have we got any apologies that we need to note? Paul's just given his for Monmouthshire, hasn't he? Because he's got had to go. Any other apologies to note?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Brocklesby.
Thanks. Okay. If we can move then to the minutes from the 9th of October. Is everyone happy to agree those? Any questions?
Move them, Chair.
Right, thank you, Steve. So we're all happy to agree those to record. Okay, so item 3 then is declarations of interest. Anything to note here? No, if anything does come up, then I think Jane's on as monitoring officer. So welcome to raise those. Item 4 then is the month 7 budget monitoring update. Over to Chris. Is Chris here? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks everyone. Possibly my last report, I guess, in terms of other items on your agenda and the need for a new interim section 151. This is to update the South Wales Corporate Joint Committee on the 23-24 month 7 monitoring report and to give you also a projected outturn. So this takes us to the end of October of this year. Paragraph 4 notes that at the meeting back in January, you adopted a budget, revenue budget then of 255,662. And then paragraph 8 references table 1, which provides an update against that position. And table 1 summarises that the amount spent to date, as at the end of October, was just under 90,000, representing around 35% of the approved budget. But overall, the budget remains on target to be fully spent during this financial year. In terms of the narrative then, to explain the key variances, those are shown in paragraphs 10 to 18 of the report. And really just to refer then members to the recommendation at paragraph 28 of the report, where members are asked to note the position in month 7 and the projected outturn position. And myself and in particular I'd like to thank Aginda in terms of the work for the CJC, here to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you, Chris, for all your hard work in the transition period. It's been very much appreciated. Any questions, colleagues, before we move to the recommendations? Okay, are we happy then to the recommendation is that the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee notes the 2023-24 month 7 budget monitoring position and the projected outturn position is set out in the report. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for those, please?
Move it, Chair.
Happy to propose, Chair, and just if I would like to say a big thank you to Chris Lee for all the work that he's done if this is his last report.
Great, thanks, Sean. So that's Sean and Steve proposed and seconded. If I can take a roll call of the vote then. Brecon Beacons National Park.
Yes, support, Chair.
Thank you, Julian. Blarney Gwent.
Agree, Chair.
Thank you, Merthyr.
Agreed, Chair, and thanks, Chris, as well, for all the hard work.
Thanks, Jane. Newport.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Jane. Caerphilly.
Agreed.
Thanks, Sean. Cardiff.
Agree.
Thanks, you. RCT.
Yes, agree.
Thanks, Andrew. Vegler Morgan.
Agree, Chair.
Thanks, Liz. Bregend.
Agree. Thanks, Chair. Thanks to Chris.
Thanks, you. And Torvine. Agreed. So that's carried unanimously. Yeah, and thanks again, Chris, for your work on this report and throughout the time that we've been doing these. Okay, we can move then to item 5, which is the Audit Wales CJC report. Welcome to Sarah Jane, who I know is here from Audit Wales. So if I hand over to you.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm Sarah Jane Burnham from Audit Wales. I think I've met most of you before in meetings like these or in other meetings. I don't intend to go into too much detail, to be honest, but just thought it'd be helpful just to kind of remind you the context for this work. So as the CJCs are obviously new audited bodies, the Auditor General is the appointed auditor of the CJCs. And in his work programme consultation letter, he set out that he was keen to do some work to understand the evolving governance arrangements. So we did some initial work last autumn, and we fed back some of our findings kind of in the spring, and then did some further work in the summer. And and thank you to everyone who's contributed to that work. So we issued separate letters to each of the 4 CJCs on the back of the feedback that we had in the spring. And we've also published a summary report. I recognise that the letter we sent to South East Wales CJC, reflects the position at a point in time, and clearly things have moved forward since then. And the summary report, the findings within that are relatively general because each of the CJCs, to be fair, are in different places. So some of the findings within the summary report will be more pertinent to you than others. But I think the key kind of message from the Auditor General is that, we'll be keeping an eye on progress over the next 12 to 18 months, and we hope to see some of the areas that we've identified in the summary report and in the individual letters being actioned over that period. And we are meeting officers later on today as well, so I'm sure we'll get an opportunity to understand what's going on. And obviously, attending these kind of meetings helps us to understand the CJC's progress as well. So I'll just very quickly go through the letter. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. Hopefully there are no surprises in there. And as I said, I'm sure things have moved forward since we actually issued this letter as well. So, clearly, the CJC was really embracing the opportunity that the CJC provided, building on the work of the city deal. In terms of its governance arrangements, it's taken a really pragmatic and considered approach. It developed a transition plan, the bare minimum approach then, whilst there were, I think it's fair to say, frustrations about dealing with some of the financial status and related issues and the time it took to do that. But it has reinvigorated that transition plan, and I know there's an update on that later on in the agenda. But at the time we did the work, some of the governance arrangements were not yet in place. For example, the Governance and Audit Committee and some of the subcommittees. But again, I can see there's a report later on which picks up some of this. So we do hope that, those kind of governance arrangements will start to be really kind of coming to the fore over the next 6 to 12 months. In terms of the plan side of it, really, then, clearly, as I said, the CJC had a real ambition, building on the work of the city deal. As I said, I mentioned about the transition plan, which we found was really comprehensive. It clearly worked through all the different things that it needed to do to get it to where it is and where it wants to be over the next couple of months. I guess the key area where we felt that there hadn't been so much progress, which again, I know you had some discussion about it at your last meeting, was around the RTP and the SDP side of things. And again, we expect to see some further progress over those, because appreciating particularly the SDP process can be quite lengthy and complex as well. As I said, I'm aware that there has been discussion around that, and we'll have a catch up with officers later on. So in terms of the partnership side of things, again, building on a strong platform with the city deal. At the time of our work, I guess the CJC hadn't really formally considered how it kind of could operate with other partnerships. And we were particularly keen to understand that because the AGW has been quite vocal about the complexity of the partnerships, different partnerships that are already in existence and how they're going to work together, really. And then lastly, we looked at the wellbeing of future generations, because obviously the CJC is a named body under the Act. The CJC had published its wellbeing objectives and its wellbeing statement. But I think the key message for us here is the CJC has a real opportunity to put the sustainable development principle at the heart of everything it does from the very beginning. And, we'll be really keen to see how it does that from here on in. So in terms of this summary report, I don't intend to go into any detail of this because I think, as I said, some of it will be more pertinent to you than other bits of it. But I just want to draw your attention to the overall conclusion and the recommendations, really. So as it says there, I think it's fair to say the CJCs are still very much in their infancy. Initially we were concerned about progress and Welsh Government's preparedness to facilitate the implementation of the CJCs. But but there has been some more positive signs of progress recently, particularly since the financial status and other issues have been resolved. And as said, we expect the Auditor General would expect to see further progress in things like the SDP and the RTP. And we've made a couple of recommendations, and I'm sure you've probably had discussions already in terms of what you're going to be doing around those. And we'll be keeping an eye on progress, as I said. And we've got a meeting later on with the officers. Just a quick whistle-stop tour, but I'm happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you, and certainly that constructive approach has been welcomed by me as we sort of have been in this transition position, and I look forward to that continuing in the new body. And as you say, the sustainable development principle I think is important as we progress. Any questions, colleagues? Okay, the recommendation. Julian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Not so much a question, but just a note to be made, because Banau Brycheiniog National Park Authority has been mentioned specifically in the report, and I noted that from Audit Wales. Thank you for that. And I would just, I suppose, to some extent concur with the findings of Audit Wales that we do wish to play our part in this, and that there are more things than just the strategic development plan that obviously impact upon the National Park Authority. And the other thing is that we as a National Park Authority are actually straddling three of these areas, which is quite a challenge for us, but it's also an opportunity because I've just been in a meeting with colleagues, chairs of other parts of our organisation who are actively involved in the other CJCs. So we actually are in a good position to share good practice across those areas. So I guess in terms of transport and economic development, certainly we would wish to at least be fully in the picture as to what's going on. But having said all that, I will say the usual caveat, which I'm sure other members here will concur with, that resources are extremely tight. And you can imagine that from a national park perspective, to have 3 CJCs to cover is quite a challenge for us. And so we will do our very best to engage with as much as we can, but within the resource that's available. So thanks very much.
Julian, certainly recognise the value that the National Park Authority can bring, and as you say, that comparative thing that was sitting across the 3 is a good one. I guess that's part of my role as chair, to make sure you're sort of brought into things as much as possible without, as you say, straining your time and resources too much. So very happy to take forward that relationship in that character. Yeah. Okay, are we happy then? The recommendation is to note the findings in the report and the letter. If I can take a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation, please.
Happy to move, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. And a seconder. Thank you, Julian. Hand up there. Okay, so if I take the vote then, to Brecon Beacons National Park.
Yes, agree, Chair.
Julian and Blarney Gwent.
Agree.
Thanks, Merthyr.
Agreed.
Newport.
Agree.
Thank Philly.
Agreed.
Thanks, Sean. Cardiff.
Agreed.
Thanks, RCT.
Agree.
Thanks, Valley Glamorgan.
Agree.
Thanks, Bridgend.
Agree.
And Torvine is agreed. So that's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah Jane, for the report. Okay, item 6 then is the 2023-24 annual business plan Q2 performance report. And if I hand over initially to Kelly on this.
Yep, thank you, Chair, and good morning again, everybody. I'll be very brief on this one because even though it's our Q2 performance report against the combined annual business plan for both CJC and Cardiff Capital Region City deal, many of the substantive updates are elsewhere on the agenda today, Chair, particularly the report around those specific transition arrangements. But you can see what this really tries to do is to bring together some of the activity around the transition arrangements, which are very much in train, but also the direct operations of the CJC in relation to some of those new duties, corporate duties, the SDP, the RTP, and specific objectives like our target operating model. So just to summarise progress, which is all set out under paragraph 5, it's all relatively healthy. Things are moving in the right direction. There's just a lot of work, and I think it's the volume and the scale of some of the complexity involved that I would highlight. So on the SDP and the regional transport plan, we are making some progress subject to some of those constraints, which Julian has already mentioned around budget and available resources. But we are compliant. We've got an implementation plan that's been submitted to Welsh Government on the regional transport plan, and we've started some of those early discussions around the strategic development plan, but noting the formal guidance on that has not yet been issued. So we're doing as much as we can until we've got that budget legally set at the end of January. In relation to the target operating model, most of that now is in place or coming together. You'll hear about those specific arrangements in a few minutes' time. And then later on the agenda today is a staffing report, which I will present confidentially. In terms of the work streams, I think everything is going well. I am now 2P'd. I am now the first employee of the South East Wales CJC via secondment. So that is in effect right now. That will scale up now over the next few weeks whilst we do the remainder of that 2P consultation. There's a lot of work going on around governance and partnerships. You'll see that in the next report. A lot of work around the finance agenda, all of the legal innovations. Again, you'll hear about that in a few minutes' time. But some really interesting stuff around policy development as well, which I think in relation to economic well-being and some of those wider social innovation activities we want to be engaged in, I think is a really positive sign. Some technical stuff happening as well around IT and the tools that we'll need as part of the new organisation. And I think, as Jane has already introduced today and will do later on this morning, we hope to set up a working group now so members can be kept abreast of everything that's happening in relation to technical developments and some of the new policies that we'll need to formulate so that the CJC can operate optimally. I know that sounds very technical and it will be by necessity, but on the other hand, we've got the more expansive strategic piece of work going on around the economic review. So trying to balance that big picture and thinking about the vision for the future, the political leadership that I know members really want to assert there, but making sure that the detail, the process, the operations, the operating model stay afoot with that all of the time. So, Chair, I won't say anything else. As I say, I think it's a very clear picture. We'll go into it in more detail in the remainder of the meeting. Happy to commend the recommendations to you and to take any questions.
Thanks, Kelly. Any questions, colleagues? I know these reports can be quite technical and bureaucratic, but I think they're essential foundations so that we can make the impact later on that we want to make and start on the right footings. A bit like, you know, building the foundations of a building, I guess, really, isn't it? You don't see much above ground, but it's vital because otherwise when you start to build the walls, then stuff starts to sink. Everyone happy then to move to the recommendations at paragraph 12, I believe they are, aren't they? That the recommendation is that we note the updates. Could I have a mover and a seconder for those, please? Oh, Liz, is that you moving them?
I will do. Happy to move, Chair.
Oh, thanks, Liz. And a
I'm
seconder,
happy to
please.
second. Yeah,
Thanks,
second.
Geraint. Oh, yeah. Is that Geraint came in first there, I think? Okay, so if we take the vote then, if we start from the west this time, Bridgen first.
Just unmuting myself. Yeah, happy to support the recommendations. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, you. Bernard Glamorgan.
Happy to agree, Chair.
Liz, RCT.
Happy to agree.
Thanks, Andrew. Cardiff.
Yeah, happy.
Thanks, you. Caerphilly.
Yeah, happy.
Sean. Newport.
Thank you, Chair. Support the recommendations.
Thanks, Jane. Merthyr.
Agree, Chair.
Thanks, Barney Gwent.
Agree, Chair.
And Brecon Beacons National Park.
Agree, Chair.
Thanks, Julian. And Torvine's agreed. So that's carried. Thank you, colleagues. So we move on now to item 7, which is the South East Wales CJC transition report. And back to Kelly and then Jane for this one, I think. Or Jane's going to start. Okay.
I'm not sure if Kelly's frozen, actually. Thank you, Chair. I'm mindful that members have just, with the exception of the member for the National Park Authority, have just heard this report. This report is a mirror of the report that went to Regional Cabinet this morning, so I'll take it in short order, if I may. 1 second, sorry. So, as members are aware, the Corporate Joint Committee came into existence in 2021. And since 2021, transition plans have been underway to transfer the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal funding agreement and other devolved funding agreements into the Corporate Joint Committee with the view to strengthening how the 10 councils and also the National Park Authority work together collaboratively and work together in the new world under a surer statutory footing with all of the statutory rights, responsibilities and protections that come with being a fully constituted public body. That work to transition City Deal into the CJC, as I say, has been ongoing since 2021, but we have had a number of delays along the way, particularly around our tax status. Those are all now resolved, and we're ready to hit the go button. And to achieve that, we need to ask members to make a series of decisions which need to be taken in a particular chronological order to allow all of those things to happen so that we have an effective date of 1st of April. The recommendations are set out in the report at paragraph 68. And the first is to consent to the novation of the City Deal funding agreement and all other incoming funding that's currently held by Cardiff Council as accountable body on behalf of the region, to novate those funding agreements from Cardiff Capital Region, from the Joint Working Agreement over to the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee. So whereas an hour ago, Regional Cabinet were asked to consent to those transfers, now sitting as members of the Corporate Joint Committee, you're asked to accept those transfers. The second recommendation is to similarly transfer all of the portfolio of projects that are funded using that money over to the Corporate Joint Committee, and those novations necessarily have to be subject to the funding coming in being novated. There is a recommendation that you delegate authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with myself as monitoring officer and where necessary with the section 151 officer to agree and execute the final form of all those legal agreements. And fourthly, the recommendation is for you as a Corporate Joint Committee to then accept responsibility for decision making under the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal. So you necessarily have to look at this as a sequence. Money coming in is novated, money going out is novated, and once those novations have taken effect and we've agreed all the necessary additions that you need to the Corporate Joint Committee's constitution and standing orders, that at that point the committee then formally take over the decision-making responsibilities of the Cardiff Capital Region under the Joint Working Agreement. The report, the second part of the report, deals with the proposed governance and partnership structure for the CJC and some transitional arrangements. As members will be aware, we're already part of the way down the road to that. So at previous meetings, you have agreed an interim constitution, you've agreed the member code of conduct. You've agreed some other key elements, including arrangements for our standards committee to sit and also for overview and scrutiny to sit. But there is still a fair amount of work to be done in the intervening period. So the proposal is that we set up a member officer working group to meet regularly between now and the next meeting of the CJC, which is on the 29th of January, and use that as an opportunity for members to start to look at all of the policies and procedures that need to be finalised and put in place before our effective date of 1st of April. That working group is proposed to be a reasonably informal working group. The actual decisions will have to be made at properly constituted meetings sitting in public. But as I say, that there's a great deal of work to be done and just paperwork to be considered between now and then. So it's proposed that we sit quite informally to break the back of that, so to speak. The proposed governance structure and the transitional arrangements for that does make provision for regional cabinets and our advisory boards to sit as and when necessary between now and the 1st of April, should, for example, a decision need to be made about an investment or so forth. There are transitional arrangements in there, but the proposal is to largely stand down that twin track of regional cabinet sitting alongside the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, certainly between now and the end of the financial year. And then finally, there is a recommendation that you make a general delegation of authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the other two statutory officers to take and implement any decision that's necessary for operational effectiveness. And appreciating that that's quite a wide delegation, we've inserted some rules for her to take those decisions, so that if she's going to make any decision for operational effectiveness, it shouldn't be one that's incurs cost that's outside of our already agreed budgets. It shouldn't be one that conflicts with any agreed plan or strategy, and it shouldn't be one that has any unusual features or political issues arising. If any of those matters do fall, then she should be referring it back to the members. But that general delegation is intended as an interim position as part of the work that we'll be doing as in our working group. One of the things that we'll need to agree is a proper scheme of delegation, but between now and then there is a great deal of just operational stuff that needs to happen. So the proposal is that she doesn't need to come back to call a meeting for every decision that's to do with, for example, the photocopier or buying stationery. And that instead she has this general delegation and reports back to members as and when appropriate. I don't propose to say anything else about the report as such. I will just flag these for the benefit of our National Park Authority member, that the novation of these agreements is the novation of funding that is currently being received, passported and spent by the 10 council members pursuant to a joint working agreement. So in terms of the actual receipt of funding and to spending with that funding, those wouldn't be a decision of the National Park Authority member. However, the bigger scheme of things, the frame of how the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee will look going forward, is obviously of interest to the National Park Authority. And I think perhaps, to use Mr. Stedman's words, I'm sure we wish to be fully appraised of what's going on.
Right. Thank you, Jane. Any questions or comments there? Julian, come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's appropriate that I make a comment given your report, Jane. Thank you very much for that and for putting in sort of our contribution to that. I suppose looking through the report, I sort of almost reiterate what I said earlier about our input into the governance and partnership side. Obviously, an appropriate role in that, which needs to be kind of worked out, I suppose, as we go along. Very happy with that we are part of the whole organisation, not just part of the one specific area, and that we have make a minor contribution perhaps in other parts. And I do quite understand the situation as far as the shifting across of the financial issues and what have you. Obviously, we will withdraw at appropriate times when there are matters that are between the authorities, and happily contribute where there are matters where we feel we can play a part. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Julian. Any other questions? Otherwise, the recommendation at paragraph 68. Are we happy to have a proposer and a seconder for those?
Move it, Anthony.
Thanks, Steve. And a seconder for those?
A second, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. Right, okay, so if we go to Bridgen first then please.
4, please, Chair.
Thanks, Valley Glamorgan.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Liz. RCT.
Agree.
Thanks, Cardiff.
Agree.
Philly.
Agree.
Newport.
Agree, Chair.
Merthyr.
Agree, Chair.
Blarney Gwent.
Agree, Chair.
Brecon Beacons National Park.
Agree, Chair.
And Torvine agreed. So that's carried. Okay. So the next agenda item is the exclusion of press and public. I had to pass a resolution to exclude members of the public for the reasons set out in the agenda. So can I have a mover or a seconder for that, please?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thanks, Liz. And to second that.
Second.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, we all happy to agree that?
Yeah.
Any
Chair, could I
objections?
could I also ask that all CCR members of staff also leave for this item, please?
So if we can confirm that the web